Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Everyone talks about spiritual awakening as if it's a beautiful sunrise. Instagram posts show peaceful monks, glowing auras, and smiling faces claiming enlightenment. But here is the truth. No one tells you. Spiritual awakening feels like dying. Not a physical death, but a psychological death so intense that most people do not survive it with their mind and spirit intact. Think about your life. Have you ever felt like everything you believed in suddenly collapsed? Like the person you thought you were didn't make sense anymore? Like reality itself was shaking beneath your feet? That is the first whisper of awakening. The destruction of illusions. Most people spend their lives asleep. They live inside beliefs, roles, identities, and routines created by their parents, society, religion, and culture. You are born, given a name, a language, a religion, a nationality, a gender role, a moral code. You are taught what is good and bad, right and wrong, worthy and shameful. You build your identity upon these foundations without ever questioning, who am I really, beyond what I was told to be? What is life beyond my limited perceptions? What if everything I believe is a lie? Living asleep is painful in its own way, filled with emptiness, confusion, and longing. But awakening is far more brutal, because awakening tears away the mask you thought was your face. Carl Jung taught that the ego, your identity, personality, roles, and beliefs, is necessary for survival. But it is also the greatest prison. Spiritual awakening begins when the ego starts to dissolve. The stories you told yourself about who you are and what life is begin to feel false. You start to see your beliefs were inherited, not chosen. Your desires were conditioned, not authentic. Your personality was a survival strategy, not your soul's expression. And as this realization grows, the ego fights back. Because awakening feels like annihilation to the ego. It feels like losing yourself. It feels like dying. This is why most people cannot survive their awakening. They panic, cling to old patterns, numb themselves with distractions, or shatter into psychological breakdowns. There is a phase in awakening known as the dark night of the soul. It is a time when nothing feels meaningful. Joy disappears. You feel disconnected from everything and everyone. You question your sanity daily. You lose interest in desires that once motivated you. Your dreams dissolve, and life feels empty and void. This is not depression in the clinical sense. It is existential death. It is the soul's mourning for the illusions it is letting go of. Most people cannot survive this phase. They run back to their old lives, cling to toxic relationships, return to addictions, or suppress their awakening with mental defenses. Because facing the void requires absolute courage. Courage to stand naked without identity. Courage to let go of everything familiar. Courage to feel alone in a universe that suddenly feels infinite and indifferent. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious mind holds all the parts of ourselves we cannot handle consciously. Shadows, fears, traumas, primal desires, existential truths. Awakening opens the gates to this unconscious realm. You start seeing the lies society is built upon, the illusions of your relationships, the falseness of your moral superiority, the emptiness of your dreams built on ego validation. It is overwhelming. The human mind was not built to carry the entire weight of reality without preparation. This is why spiritual awakening has driven many into madness throughout history. It is why many mystics, saints, and prophets went into isolation, caves, forests, or monasteries to survive the unbearable truths their awakening revealed. Eckhart Tolle, author of The Power of Now, shared how his awakening felt like dying. He woke up one night with intense despair, thinking, "I cannot live with myself any longer." In that moment, he realized, if he could not live with himself, then who was the I, and who was myself? This thought shattered his ego completely. He fell into a state of nothingness for hours, then woke up the next morning in profound peace. But before the peace came, the psychological death, the ego collapse. Most people reach the edge of this collapse, but run back in terror before crossing it. Social media sells awakening as yoga poses under waterfalls, journaling with herbal tea and incense, smiling faces with good vibes only captions. But true awakening is shaking under existential terror at 3 a.m., losing the meaning you built your life upon, feeling disconnected from your own mind and body, mourning the death of your old self. Jung believed that before pursuing enlightenment, one must integrate their shadow. Carl Jung taught that spiritual awakening often begins with crisis. A sudden loss, heartbreak, illness, betrayal, or existential breakdown shakes the foundations of your identity. Imagine a magnificent temple built on sand. Every prayer, ritual, and celebration felt stable, until the ground beneath starts to collapse. You lose your job. Your partner leaves you. Someone you love dies. Your health fails. Everything you thought was you begins to crumble. This is the universe's brutal mercy, to take away what is false so you can awaken to what is real. In the crumbling phase, people panic. They cling desperately to broken relationships, toxic jobs, dying dreams. They beg life to restore what is collapsing, not realizing it is collapsing because it was never real stability. This is where most people give up on awakening. They numb themselves with alcohol, drugs, or pleasure. Endless distractions, social media, TV, gossip, spiritual bypassing, pretending positivity while rotting inside. They refuse to face the truth. The life they built was not truly theirs. If you survive the crumbling, you enter the void. This is the dark night of the soul we discussed. But here, it deepens. You feel profound meaninglessness, disconnection from reality, dissociation from your identity, loss of motivation, desire, purpose, terror of the unknown. You no longer resonate with old friends. You can't participate in shallow conversations. Music, movies, desires that once gave you pleasure feel empty. Why the void feels like death? Because it is death. Your old self has died, but the new self has not been born yet. You are in the liminal space between who you were and who you are becoming. Carl Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And the void forces you to face your soul in naked silence. As you sit in the void, your shadow emerges. Every part of yourself you suppressed. Anger you never expressed. Grief you buried. Sexual desires you shamed, jealousies, insecurities, wounds, memories you locked away. They all rise like ghosts demanding acknowledgement. Most people cannot handle this. They were taught to be good, polite, positive, and pure. They don't want to see the manipulative parts of their mind, the cruelty hidden under their kindness, the lust hidden under their purity, the hatred hidden under their forgiveness. But awakening is shadow integration. Without integrating your shadow, you remain half awake, floating between illusion and truth. Carl Jung explained that the shadow is not evil. It is simply what you could not accept as me. But facing it feels like madness because you see how false your identity was. You realize your darkness is as real as your light. You lose your moral superiority. You feel raw, exposed, unguarded. This is why most spiritual seekers stop here. They run back to love and light teachings that ignore the shadow, numbing themselves with affirmations and ignoring their unintegrated wounds. After confronting the shadow, ego death deepens. Here, you realize you are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not your achievements, failures, or reputation. You are not your body or desires. You are not even your spiritual experiences. You are the awareness behind it all. Pure consciousness. But this realization is not always blissful. It is terrifying to the ego because it realizes it is an illusion trying to maintain itself. Before enlightenment, Siddhartha faced Mara, the demon of illusions. Mara tempted him with fear, desire, and power. But he simply said, "I see you, Mara." This is what ego death demands. Seeing through every illusion without attachment, fear, or seduction. If you survive ego death, you emerge reborn. You no longer need external validation. You no longer fear rejection or aloneness. You see life as a dream and yourself as the dreamer. You live with humility, groundedness, and deep compassion. You integrate both light and shadow without judgment. This is enlightenment, not a grand mystical experience, but radical presence and authenticity. Why few reach rebirth. Because most people cannot let go of their identities. Fear their own shadow. Cling to attachments that keep them asleep. Choose comfort over truth. Awakening is the path of death and rebirth. The old you must die for the real you to be born. But humans fear death, so they remain trapped in half-awake suffering. When people begin awakening, many seek spiritual knowledge to escape their pain. They consume teachings, books, retreats, rituals, and practices. They become obsessed with chakras, crystals, shadow work, star seeds, manifestations, twin flames. But instead of dissolving their ego, they build a spiritual identity. I'm a healer. I'm an old soul. I'm more evolved than others. I'm an empath. I absorb energies. This identity feels powerful because it's rooted in knowledge and mysticism. But it is still an identity, a mask, a persona, a false self. Have you ever met someone who claims to be awakened but speaks with hidden arrogance? They say, "These low-vibration people drain me." Only awakened souls can understand this truth. You're stuck in ego, but I've transcended it. This is not awakening. This is spiritual narcissism. Carl Jung taught that the ego can wear any mask to maintain its sense of specialness, even the mask of spirituality. The illusion of manifestation without shadow work. The modern spiritual community sells manifestation as the ultimate power. Visualize it, believe it, receive it. But here is the brutal truth. If you do not integrate your shadow, your manifestations will come from your wounds, not your soul. You may manifest a partner, but if your shadow is filled with abandonment wounds, you will attract a partner who triggers that pain. You may manifest money, but if your shadow carries guilt about wealth, you will sabotage it or use it to fill your emptiness. Without shadow work, manifestation is self-deception. The lie of love and light. You hear it everywhere. Just focus on love and light. Ignore negativity. It lowers your vibration. Only positive thoughts create positive reality. This is spiritual bypassing, the avoidance of shadow under the guise of spirituality. Carl Jung taught, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Your darkness, wounds, rage, grief, jealousy, lust. These are not barriers to enlightenment. They are the gateways. Avoiding them in the name of positivity keeps you trapped in unconscious fear, forever rejecting half of your being. Think of spiritual teachers exposed for abuse, manipulation, or exploitation. They spoke of love, light, and God, but acted from unintegrated shadows of greed, lust, or power addiction. Because knowledge of truth is not embodiment of truth. Without integrating the shadow, spiritual knowledge becomes poison. It empowers the unhealed ego to control others. Many seekers treat awakening as a finish line. Once I awaken, I'll never suffer again. Once enlightened, I'll be above human pain. But awakening is not an ending. It is a beginning. Even after awakening, you feel pain, anger, grief, and fear. The difference is, you are no longer enslaved by them. You feel them without being them. Awakening is not floating above life. It is entering life fully, deeply, honestly, without illusions. Why most people never survive. This realization. When seekers realize, awakening destroys their identity. Awakening demands shadow work. Awakening is not glamorous, but painfully honest. Awakening will not make them special, only free. They abandon the path. They prefer the comfort of illusions, rituals, and communities that keep them feeling spiritual without forcing them to confront their darkness. Jung warned that awakening too quickly, without psychological integration, leads to madness. Because the mind craves structure, when illusions collapse and nothing replaces them, the psyche fractures. This is why he insisted, shadow integration before spiritual transcendence. Grounded self-work before cosmic exploration. Humility before wisdom. Without these, awakening becomes insanity, masquerading as enlightenment. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who pierced human illusions ruthlessly, collapsed into madness in his final years. He saw truths about reality, morality, Gottesstaat, and human nature that shattered his mind's structure. His story is a reminder. Seeing ultimate truths without a strong psyche is like looking into the sun with naked eyes. It blinds you instead of illuminating. To truly awaken, you must integrate your shadow without judgment. Dissolve your ego without clinging to a spiritual identity. Live in radical honesty without superiority. Accept the pain of being human while knowing you are infinite consciousness. This is the razor's edge path. Imagine awakening as climbing a mountain. You've spent years with friends in the valley, sharing meals, laughter, and conversations about life in the shadows. But one day, you begin to climb. At first, you invite them to come along, but they laugh it off. Why struggle? It's comfortable here. Stop overthinking life. You've changed, and not in a good way. So you continue alone. The higher you climb, the quieter it becomes. The air thins, the view expands. But when you look down, you see them living their old routines, unaware of the storms and stars above. Carl Jung taught that awakening expands consciousness beyond personal identity into universal truth. This shift in perception makes daily small talk feel empty. Gossip feels pointless. Complaining about life feels unconscious. Competing for status feels childish. Arguments about beliefs feel irrelevant. You see people trapped in illusions, chasing validation, running from emptiness, addicted to distractions, and you can no longer join them in their games. When you try to share your awakening insights, they react with confusion. What are you talking about? Mockery. "Oh, so you're enlightened now?" Fear. "You're not making sense. Are you okay?" Their reactions trigger doubt within you. Maybe I am going crazy. Maybe I should stay silent. Maybe no one will ever understand me again. This is why many awakened souls withdraw from the world. Not out of arrogance, but exhaustion. Carl Jung himself experienced this loneliness. After his break from Freud, when he began exploring the unconscious, archetypes, and spiritual symbolism, the academic community mocked him. He retreated to his tower in Bollingen, where he carved stones, studied dreams, and lived in silent communion with nature. Because he realized, people will only understand you as deeply as they understand themselves. Why relationships dissolve. After awakening. When you awaken, relationships built on trauma bonding, ego validation, shared illusions, emotional dependence begin to crumble. You no longer play the role they need you to play. Your boundaries become firm. Your silence becomes uncomfortable for them. Your honesty becomes threatening. For example, the friend who loved gossiping with you feels rejected when you disengage. The partner who relied on your constant emotional caretaking feels threatened by your new self-respect. The family members who shaped your identity feel attacked by your independence. They say, "You've changed. You're selfish now. You think you're better than us." But it is not superiority. It is awakening from the illusions that kept you imprisoned alongside them. The death of dreams and ambitions. Before awakening, you may have chased wealth for validation, relationships to feel whole, success to feel worthy, status to feel powerful. But after awakening, these desires lose their grip. You see through them, like seeing stage props behind the theater curtains. This creates an existential void. If these dreams are meaningless, what is the purpose of my life? Why most people return to sleep? This loneliness becomes unbearable for many. Humans are social creatures. We crave connection, understanding, and belonging. When awakening strips this away, the soul longs for company in its pain. So many choose to shut their eyes to truth, shrink their awareness to fit back in, abandon their awakening to feel loved again. They trade their truth for belonging. But deep down, a silent grief remains. The grief of betraying one's own soul. Jung taught, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. When you awaken, your language changes. You speak of consciousness, shadow, ego death, illusions, but they hear nonsense. You speak of freedom, but they fear losing their chains. Most people never survive their awakening because they cling to comfort over truth, illusions over reality, belonging over authenticity. But if you choose to walk this path fully, remember, awakening will break you. But what remains after the breaking is unbreakable. Comment below. I choose truth. no matter the cost. Subscribe to Psychatic for more raw, Carl Jung truths on awakening, shadow work, and brutal psychological realities. If this video shattered your illusions and set you free, consider leaving a super thanks to support the channel. Share this with someone who feels lost in their awakening right now.